Okay, welcome back to Parshas Hashavua. This week's Parsha is Parshas Chukas. Parshas Chukas, where we learn in the beginning of the Parsha the laws of the Para Aduma, the red heifer, which was a very interesting mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of how to purify someone that is come into contact with a dead body and has contracted the impurity of what we call tamei meis, very severe impurity. And normally impurities, there's lots of mitzvahs in the Torah to do with purity and impurity. Normally, the process of purification with impurity is to go to mikveh, which is the case also when coming into contact with someone who's a dead body. But in addition, with this type of impurity, it needs the para aduma, the red heifer. It has to be completely red. It is slaughtered, it's burnt, and the ashes are mixed with spring water and sprinkled on the person during a 7-day period on the third and the seventh day, and that's how they become pure. Now, the Torah begins this by telling us that Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu and so on, and he said, "V'yikhu eilecha," they should take to you, they should bring you a para aduma, but they had to be prepared and everything by the kohen. But it was called eilecha, was brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. Rashi says, "La'olam nikra'as al shmecha," it will always be called on your name. Because what this means is that actually the para aduma, the red heifer in the midbar, in the desert, was not the only one. The Rambam explains that throughout history, until the end of the second temple, second Beis Hamikdash, there were 9 red heifers, and the 10th will be when Mashiach comes. But nevertheless, they're all considered Moshe Rabbeinu, to be called after the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. There are many reasons for this, and also what it means. The Kli Yakar explains, because Rashi says in this week's Parsha that the para aduma, the red heifer, was actually an atonement for the egel azov, for the golden calf. Just like a mother has to clean up the mess of a child, so too the para aduma is the cow, atoned for the egel hazov, for the golden calf. And it was Moshe Rabbeinu who got Hashem to forgive the Jewish people, to give them a second chance, to give them an atonement. And therefore, the para aduma is always called on Moshe Rabbeinu's name, because he's the one that brought in the atonement for the para aduma, for the egel azov and for the golden calf. Okay, now the Torah begins this parsha by saying that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Zois chukas haTorah." This is the chukah of the Torah. Now, what does that mean? First of all, what does it mean that it's a chayk? A chayk means a mitzvah that doesn't have any reason. But we know it also says, because there are different types of mitzvahs. There are those mitzvahs that have an explanation or have a rational sort of explanation to them. But then there are mitzvahs that have no reason, or we don't know the reason. Para aduma is certainly one of them. But it starts off by saying, "Zois chukas haTorah." This is the chukah of the whole Torah. Now, we know that para aduma is a very classic chayk, a very classic mitzvah that doesn't have a reason. In fact, Shlomo HaMelech, we know. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, the wisest of all men, said, "Amarti achakmu," I used to say that I was smart, that I was able to figure out all the mitzvahs, including the chukim. One doesn't have reason, but v'hiru choykam in many, but this one, para aduma, he felt was distance to him, it was different. What that means is that the other chukim sometimes can be partially explained. But nevertheless, when it comes to para aduma, it is considered a real chukah. It's completely beyond our rationale, beyond our understanding. What is so bizarre about para aduma? So there's many explanations in the Mefarshim. One of the explanations is it's the way it was prepared. The cow, the red heifer, when it was taken out meaning it defies all logic, and it defies even, because the whole thing of purity and impurity in general is an irrational thing. We don't really understand it properly. So just Hashem tells us, we don't really understand what makes something pure, what makes something impure. But also, the way it was prepared, it kind of defies all the systems of the Torah. How so? So, for example, it had to be brought by a kohen, right? So it was considered a korban, it was considered a sacrifice. One of the things with sacrifices, all the sacrifices, was that it has to be done in the Beis Hamikdash, within the walls of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. To shecht a korban, to slaughter a korban outside of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash is a very severe transgression. It doesn't work. The korban is ineffective. And with Parah Aduma, it's called the carbon on the one hand. You have to have a kohen that shechtza, the kohen that does it all. And yet it was done out specifically, not only could be done outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it had to be done outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Not only did it have to be done outside the Beis HaMikdash, but we know traditionally that there was in Yerushalayim, there was 3 camps. It's called the camp of Kahuna, the camp of the Levim, and the camp of Yisraelim. In other words, it's got to be outside the community, not just outside the Beis HaMikdash. Where the Yisraelim live, it had to actually be done michutz lamachane, completely outside the camp. In fact, in Yerushalayim, where it used to be done, was on Har HaZeisim. You can see Har HaZeisim today. It's a mountain. No one lives there. It's outside the living part of Yerushalayim. Nowadays, it's used as a cemetery. It's East Jerusalem, and it's just a mountain. No one actually ever lived there. And that's where the Parah Aduma had to be prepared, had to be shechted and burnt, and the ashes had to be mixed there with the water. All had to be there on the side, and yet it was a korban, so kind of it contradicts the whole thing, contradicts the whole idea. The other things, other difficulties with it, it makes people pure. When you sprinkle the Parah Aduma, it made the person who was Tomei become pure, but the person who prepared the Parah Aduma and sprinkled the Parah Aduma solution on the person who became impure was actually he himself became Tomei. Not such a severe tumor, you could just go to mikveh, but it's a very interesting thing, as it says by the Parah Aduma, metaher es hatmeim, it would purify those that were impure, umetame es hatahorim, and it would make tamei those that were already pure, which is again, it's an oxymoron. It doesn't really make sense, and it was just a mitzvah that is beyond our scope of understanding completely. That's why it's the classic chukah. But here comes the question. Parah Aduma, it says, Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the law of the Torah. What it should have said, one would imagine, is Zois Chukas HaPorah. This is the law of Parah Aduma. Why does it say Zois Chukas HaTorah? So what it tells us is the following. It tells us that, in fact, this is the chukah of the entire Torah. What does that mean? It's the chukah that should guide and inspire and direct the entire Torah. Let's develop this idea. So again, we commenting on the pasuk Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the chukah of the Torah. I'm explaining that Parah Aduma in fact becomes the foundation of the entire Torah. Let's understand this. The word chukah, Rashi brings at the beginning that chukim are irrational. We are taunted, we are made fun of by the nations of the world while we keep these mitzvahs. And yet we know Torah says, chukah hakakti, it's a mitzvah. We have no permission to question or to explore. We just have to keep it because Hashem said so. When it comes to the Parah Aduma, it is completely like that. It's something we keep only because we believe in Hashem, which actually has a lot to do with the word chukah. The word chukah can also come from the word hakikah, to be engraved. It's a famous idea. What's the difference between written letters that are written on the parchment, or letters that are engraved in a stone, for example, right? The difference is when you have letters written on parchment, at the end of the day, the letters and the parchment are very connected, but they're two separate things to the point that the letters could be erased. They could be taken off the parchment. When letters are engraved in a stone, that means the writing and the stone are one thing. One thing, engraved. They're inseparable. Unless the stone breaks, of course, but otherwise the letters and the stone are one thing. You can't separate between them. Our relationship to Hashem, to the Torah, is also like that. Sometimes a Yid can keep Torah mitzvahs, but at the end of the day, the person and the Torah mitzvah, they're connected, but they're two separate things. And therefore, it's not necessarily permanent. It could change, and so on. However, deep down, in the very essence of our neshama, we are one with Hashem. At the very essence of neshama, we have what's called Kabbalas oil. We are completely surrendered to Hashem without any questions. The deep emunah, the deep faith, the unconditional faith that a Yid has in Hashem, which is part of the neshama's DNA, at the very depth of the neshama, that's like engraved. You can't separate. You can't separate a Jew from his faith. It's from that part of the neshama, that we keep chukim. We keep things we don't understand, particularly the Parah Aduma. because we don't understand them. It makes no sense to us. There's so many questions on the mitzvah of paraduma, and yet we keep it, no questions asked, because the way we keep the paraduma has to come from a very deep place in our neshama, and a place of chukim, a place of hakiko, a place where our faith in Hashem is not written on us, but it's engraved in us. It's part of who we are. You cannot separate us from our amunah and our mesiras nefesh and our kabbalas oil and bitul. It's just part of who we are, and therefore we just need to ignite that part of the neshama, and then we just keep the mitzvahs. We keep chukim as well. So when we keep a chukah, particularly paraduma, it's actually a beautiful thing. We don't understand the reason, we don't understand what's going on, but the observance of the mitzvah is coming from a very deep place of anashama, where Hashem's Torah mitzvahs are engraved, imprinted, completely one with our neshama. Comes along the Torah and says, Zois chukas haTorah. This is the chukah, not only of paraduma, but it's the chukah of the entire Torah. That means the following. What Hashem is asking us to do, and this is a fundamental principle, that we should keep all the mitzvahs like we keep paraduma. We should keep all the mitzvahs like a pure chukah, meaning even the mishpatim, even the mitzvahs that we understand, even the mitzvahs that are completely rational. In fact, some mitzvahs are so logical and rational, it could be, we could work it out even chas v'sholom if the Torah wasn't given to us. Like don't steal, honor parents. This is normal society stuff. There's a very good explanation. Even the mitzvahs, like, for example, which we call edus, like we wouldn't make up ourselves, we wouldn't discover ourselves that we're supposed to eat matzah on Pesach, but once we are given the mitzvah, we're given a reason because the Jews break bread and they couldn't rise and so on and so forth. Therefore, we keep its explanation. But when you keep a mitzvah because of its explanation, your commitment is limited. It goes as far as you understand. If you stop understanding, then it weakens your passion, it weakens your commitment of how you keep the mitzvah. So really what the Torah is telling us, that even the mishpatim, even the mitzvahs that have reasons, the real reason that we're supposed to keep them is like chukim, because they have no reason, because Hashem said so, that's why. It's not limited to paraduma. Zois chukas Torah means keep the entire Torah like that. Now, of course, you could ask, if that's the case, why did Hashem give us reasons for some of the mitzvahs? Because at the end of the day, Hashem wants us also to understand. But that shouldn't be the source and the origin and the reason why we're observing them. We observe them with just the same commitment, coming from the same deep place of the neshama that chukim come from, the place where it's engraved. Therefore, it's unconditional. We do it because Hashem said so, that's why. No reasons, no explanations needed. This explains, actually, and this is something from the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, that's why the korban of paraduma was actually done outside the Beis Hamikdash, michutz lamachane. Because paraduma, as we said, the keeping of paraduma comes from a very deep place, comes from the holiest place of our neshama. But Hashem wants that commitment to spread even to the lowest part of our neshama, even to everything in our life, the way we keep the chuk, the mishpatim, the way we keep the mitzvahs that we understand, the way we behave every day. That commitment to Hashem, that oneness of Hashem, should extend even michutz lamachne, even to the very mundane and the very low parts of our neshama, the lower levels, to our intellect, to our emotions, to our behavior. Everything should be imbued with that fundamental commitment that we have to Hashem, just like we have with the paraduma, because we don't understand it. Therefore, the only way to observe it is for it to come from the deep part of our neshama, where there's chakika, where there's engraving. So too, that needs to extend to all parts of our neshama. That's why it was not done in the Beis Hamikdash. It was done b'chutz lamachane, because that commitment must spread to every single part of our Jewish experience, every single part of our neshama, every single way that we serve Hashem. That's why it was done b'chutz lamachane. And that's why it says, Zois chukas haTorah. This is the law not only of paraduma. This is the commitment not only limited to the paraduma. This is the approach, the perspective, the commitment for you to keep the entire Torah, Zois chukas haTorah. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and wishing you all a good day and ultimately a very good Shabbos. Have a great day.